Welcome, everyone, to the F6P NFL DFS Kickoff Show. I'm Keith Flemming. As you can see, Joe the Brain Matz is missing in action. I'm hoping he is going to jump on and join us before we get out of here. But either way, we got to make the plays, hopefully give you winners. Last week, we had another really solid week. Not going to lie, Jaden Daniels kind of busted a lot of my cash lineups. It was the right call. It just unfortunately, injuries happen. It's a part of life. But we were all over Joe Mixon last week. He had another monster game. We talked about obviously Kyron Williams. He had a monster game. Kareem Hunt was a guy at running back. He had a very big game. And then my best play, I continue to be the guy that just gives these discount bargain tight ends. I was all over Jonnu Smith. Joe looked at me like I was crazy. Who's the crazy one now? So we're on to week 8, and the QB position for me is very simple, and it's very short list. Lamar Jackson. The only concern I have is, will Cleveland with Jameis Winston be able to score enough points to keep up, to make the Ravens keep the pedal to the metal? Because, I think it's 141 points the Ravens have scored the last 4 weeks. You look at it, Lamar had just 2 touchdowns the first 2 weeks when they started 0-2. He's got 15 cents. He's averaging almost 9 points per game just on the ground and rushing, which is absurd. If we're being honest, that's the main reason I love him. And this is a Cleveland team that has really struggled as of late. They have, the Browns are supposed to have a good defense. That was the whole thing. I know their offense has been awful. Deshaun Watson, who is no longer an issue, but the defense was supposed to be good. And even the defense now is in a position where they're getting cooked a lot of weeks, and teams are just able to move the ball pretty easily on them. Lamar, again, since week 2, he scored at least 22.9 in every game. And on a slate where I don't love a lot of QBs, I don't hate him as a safe play. And you'll see, because you can spin down at running back, receiver, tight end this week and feel fairly confident in what you're doing. So, again, it's a small list at QB, but Caleb Williams should absolutely be considered. Awful start to the season. We all remember first 2 games, combined with Jaden Daniels just going bananas, and people were crapping all over Caleb Williams, and maybe rightfully so. Who knows? But he turned it around. Now, granted, it's been against some bad defenses. Like the last 2 weeks, he's looked absolutely incredible. I know it seems like an attorney because he's been on a bye, but 26 points or more in 2 straight. That was against arguably 2 of the worst defenses in the league, in Carolina and Jacksonville. The Rams game, week 4, gives me a little pause, but you go back even to the Indy game. He's thrown now 300 yards or more and 2 of 4, and scored again 23 points or more in 3 of his last 4. So I wish that Daniels was playing. I don't think he will. I'd be kind of shocked, honestly, if Washington ends up pulling the trigger and has Daniels play this week. It would be very risky. Why? They're the number 2 seed. They're kind of locked in right now to that position. The NFC East is down, and this is a good Bears defense. I would not play him. So I do have concerns that with Marcus Mariota, Washington can't score enough to where, same concerns I kind of had about Lamar, you could have about Caleb, but I just think he's going to want to go off. This is a chance for him to sort of send a message, especially, looks like Daniels is not playing. Caleb would enjoy to go into Washington and just, torch Washington's defense, which you look at them, they're 19th on DK. Yeah, 19th on DK. And that, that's not bad. It's not great. They've also played Deshaun Watson already this year. They played Andy Dalton. That's a big reason for that. Don't forget what guys like Baker, who I think is actually a very good comp to Caleb in a lot of ways, a guy that can, pretty much make all the throws, has a little bit of sneaky rushing ability. And Baker had a monster game versus this Washington defense. And the main thing I like about Caleb is just he has that rushing floor. Like Caleb has 190 rushing yards just since week 2. It's got like 90 the last 2 weeks. So they are, that just raises his potential. And at 6K, if he gets me 20 points in a cash game, I'm all over that. So I do really like Caleb. The other guy I want to mention, God, man, what a weird time to be alive, but Bo Nix, the Denver Broncos. Like, yeah, here we are. We're talking about Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos. I did not expect to be here, if I'm being 100% honest, but here we are. Bo is another guy that really rough start to the season. I mean, I think he had a game where he had under 1 yard per attempt. That's not good, but he's come around. Like seriously, the first, 4 weeks, which again kind of shows is how high his floor is. He was terrible. And yet 13, 10-3, 19.3. And then obviously that 6.7 game versus the Jets was the low point. The game that they won, by the way. But since then, like 4 passing touchdowns, 20 points or more in 2 of 3, and even 14-1 last week in a game that, if you remember, that game got out of hand early versus New Orleans. They were able to run all over them. And yeah, this game could get out of hand with Carolina, but he's 5,600. Again, if we're going by the cash game principle, 3X is what's most important. It's not a bad option. And the reason I'm confident in saying that is he has also seemed to have turned a corner on the rushing side. I mean, he has 136 yards just the last 2 weeks. The 75 last week is shocking. He's now averaging right at 7 rush attempts per game, averaging almost 2 rush attempts per game in the red zone. And what I like about Nix and Cash is you could pair him with Javonte Williams, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea. You could obviously pair him with Troy Franklin, and we'll talk about when we get the wide receivers here in a minute. But there's a bunch of different ways you could do this, and I think it makes sense, personally. I really do. And obviously there's a good chance I get burned by this. I understand that. It's Bo Nix. But I am, this is where I differentiate from Dave Eddy a little bit. And Dave is one of the smartest guys in the business. 110%. I've learned so much from him in the last 2 years. However, I'm not afraid to chase the upside. Even in cash, I'm not. Like, if I feel really good about a matchup, there's no defense worse in the NFL than the Carolina Panthers right now. Pass, run, you name it. And you got a guy in this range, you can play it. The last guy I just want to mention, and this is, again, Dave Eddy probably shoot me for mentioning this in cash, but I'll stand by it. Jameis Winston, 5,200. And this is one of those deals that, again, 5,200 by the principles that I do believe in. Me and Dave completely are aligned and agree on that your goal should be 150 points each week. If you hit 150 and single entries, double ups, you're probably going to cash, which, hey, that's what we really want our floor to be, right? And I mean, come on, like the Browns are not as bad as their offense has been. I truly believe that's how bad Deshaun Watson is. I look at what happened in Carolina, and I think there's a very good chance it's a similar thing this week with Cleveland. Where I'm not saying like by any means that Cleveland's offense is going to be like elite or really good, but they're better than what we've seen. And we saw that again in Carolina. Carolina's offense looked absolutely dreadful. You put in just a competent quarterback who could throw a little bit. And all of a sudden, they're scoring like 20 points a game for a stretch. Now, it's gone the other way again, but for a stretch it was. And all we're looking for is this week. And the Ravens, again, they score so many points. They've scored 140-something points their last 4 games. It's outrageous. That heavy pass script for Jameis Winston. 110%. And the other good thing is the Ravens are still very good against the run. So, like your Nick Chubb, Cleveland leaning on the run. That's not going to work, especially with Baltimore scoring points. And you just look at like last week was a prime example. Cleveland had 6 touchdowns the entire season heading into their final drive of that game where Jameis was finally put in because both Watson and DTR got knocked out. He let him down for a touchdown. Threw it 11 times. He spread it around. Tillman, Njoku, Judy all caught 3 passes. He even hit the 2-point conversion. So a lot of good things happened. If you want to get frisky, I mean, you could pair Winston and Tillman. I think it's for like under 9K. And at that point, you can really get creative if you like this slate. But overall, I'm probably going with Lamar. There he is. You know, he just shows up whenever the hell he wants. He's getting really arrogant in his older age. He's lucky that I love him. What's going on, Joe?
Not too much. You know, just kind of enjoying that Dodgers and Yankees fans got to be so stressed out tonight. That's what I'm about.
Is the game over?
No, it's still going. 2-1, 1 out for the Dodgers, down 1. So,
man, I bet that our boy Kevin Tompkins is crapping himself right now. So, for the QBs, Joe, I talked about Lamar. I think he's just the safest play. But I did mention
what I wanted to ask you, because I was thinking about it after we just wrapped that other one. What defense or defenses, because it can't be a long list though, would you be hesitant to play Lamar against, assuming his price is under $8,000? Like, is there anyone where you're like, you know what, I'm probably staying away?
No, because he's averaging 9 points per game on the ground. He's 11th in rushing yards in the NFL. And then on top of that, oh, by the way, he's got 15 passing touchdowns. Like, I think that, you know, I talked about this last year as well. I was so excited. I saw Todd Monken in action at UGA, what he got out of Stetson Bennett. And I believe he's just a wonderful play caller, designer of offenses. And that's why I was so high on Lamar last year. And obviously that paid off. And
even better this season.
And that's what because, you know, I will admit the playoff game scared me a little bit because I don't know what the hell they were doing. I really don't. Well, like, it was one of the weirdest. Is that me or you? Is that you?
Sorry, yeah.
Okay.
I was trying to pull up DraftKings on my phone.
I thought God was calling to me or something.
And then I was like, I forgot I'd just been on Instagram.
Good. So. I really thought God was calling me in my ear. I'm like, what is going on here?
The first clip was Nick Offerman in a Parks and Rec, so close enough.
I mean, if there is a man, God, it would definitely be Ron Swanson. That's right. And I mean, the Derrick Henry thing is the other thing. You know, we mentioned this briefly on the show earlier that I think they're going to win the Super Bowl. Like if their offense stays healthy, like I don't know if the other teams in the AFC can keep up with them. Like I have concerns about their defense, but I just like Tony Romo did such a good job 2 weeks ago in the Washington game talking about with Derrick Henry back there, it's pick your poison, right? Like you literally have to load 8 in the box because you have Lamar and Derrick Henry to worry about. And then it's just like, good luck covering Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Mark Andrews.
I mean, it's one of those things where, when those two obviously joined up this offseason, you know, you could have made an argument like, oh, Henry's going to take away some of the rushing payoff that we get from Lamar.
Yep.
He's not going. Henry won't see the same volume because Lamar is going to run and pass. And at least thus far, it is exactly what you just said. Yeah, it's all pick your poison. So the efficiency has gone through the roof. They've been fantastic. The only hard part has been figuring out which Ravens tight end to play in any given week. But yeah, Lamar's been awesome. It's been great for me as someone.
Freddie just hit a grand slam to win 6-3.
What? That's insane.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Poor Kev, and I'll be able to needle some of my fellow Braves fans who were just so cavalier when we let Mr. Freddie Freeman go, and they blame his agent and all this stuff. I'm like, we should have. To me, Freddie was like a Chipper Jones type guy that like he'd been there the whole time. He was still really good was the other part. And I'm still not over us letting him go. But anyway,
did you just real quick, we're on the subject. So,
sure.
The pitcher who came in for the Yankees in the bottom of the 10th was Jake Cousins. And I don't know if you saw, but Kevin was quick on the draw there right when he came in. So 15 minutes ago, he tweeted, "A Cousins in prime time. Yikes!" Lo and behold, proven once again to be an issue.
Kevin is legit one of the best tweeters. Is that a word? People on Twitter. Like some of his tweets are just
best follows on Twitter, right?
Yeah, fantastic. And that is amazing. And screw you, Kev. That's now the Atlanta Falcons, and Kirk Cousins is our quarterback. We won that big Thursday night primetime game. Okay.
Thursdays don't count. Nobody watches those.
Oh, yeah, they do. Come on, Joe. So Lamar, Knicks, Williams was really the three I said. I did just mention Winston because, I was talking about I respect Dave Eddy so much. But I believe more in taking your shots. Like if you believe in something and you can make a case that the guy's cheap, and we're still following by the principles that me and Dave 100% agree on, that 3 times your salary is, basically if that can be your floor, you're good. That I think because you could stack Winston and Tillman for under 9K and then literally can do whatever you want from there. And I actually probably would double stack them. If you're going to do that, you might as well throw a Njoku in there. And literally you can, you want Mixon, you want whoever you can
go all out.
Is there any other QBs you want to mention or you want to move on to the backs?
I think there's a Jordan Love argument.
Okay.
I just think,
the fact that he throws 3 touchdowns basically every game?
Yeah, he hasn't been hyper consistent, but he hasn't really had a bad fantasy game. He's had 2 really strong ones, and the Jaguars have been horrific defensively. It's obvious. This isn't one of those like, oh, here's some advanced stats. It's like they're 32nd against quarterbacks on DK.
It's not good.
It's there. So I think there's an argument for that. Now, the 900 versus spending up to Lamar, I think it's close. I think that's comparable to me.
But is that more about just your concern with Baltimore getting up so big that they're just running and, you know what I mean? Like they're
I think there's a little bit of that. And also
on offense.
Cleveland's defense has not been good this season. I wouldn't say it's truly a bad defense though. Whereas like Jacksonville, for whatever issues we can point to with like Trevor Lawrence not living up to the hype that he always had, blah, blah, blah. The defense is the much larger problem in Jacksonville, where the reverse was true in Cleveland. So, I just think easy matchup for Love there, and so that's a lean for me. But I think either of those 2 guys in cash, love them. Really big on the Caleb Williams play. Probably like it more if Daniels is a go even. But I just think Williams has been ramping up, obviously against 2 really bad defenses, which I'm sure you mentioned, but. I think Washington's a better defense than Carolina, sure, but I don't think this defense is good. I think they've been feasting kind of lately on some not so good offenses, and that stops here. So
we're not trying to be politically correct. They suck, okay? Like great offense, not a good
Caleb's
defense.
Probably my favorite play just because we're not spending a lot of money. He's had back-to-back huge games, so we know he can do it. And a defense that I don't think is good. And, we'll get to it later, but one of the worst defenses against number 1 wide receivers, which is also helpful if we're trying to pair him with a DJ Moore. But look, I mostly, the guys you talked about, I think those are largely the plays.
All right. Running backs. We had that show earlier and it's kind of got me, I won't say off, but just to where originally I was planning on playing Mixon or Hall. Like I really was. FYI, we now know that Breece Hall's projected ownership is 30%.
That's a lot.
I think that may be even too much for me because that's just like, God, man, like if he has a great game, it's going to hurt you, but I feel like you can fill in enough to where you can fight off that to where if he has a bad game at 30% ownership, man, you are fighting, like the chance of cashing are very slim. And I really think the way I'm building lineups this week, the most expensive guy I'd probably be willing to go would be actually J.K. Dobbins at 6,900. I did look it up. He's right now projected to be like under 4% owned too. But I'm not even going to go there. I'm going to go further down This range is just too good. Like Kareem Hunt, 6,300. He's up to 9th in expected fantasy points. I think he's up to 7th in weighted opportunities. This is a team that runs the 9th highest rate in the league. And then, oh, by the way, he has freaking like 16 red zone touches the last 2 weeks. So
pretty good.
That's a slam dunk. A-Chain we talked about. I don't really need to do anything other than just the stat that I apologize. I can't remember who shared it, but he's played 6 games with Tua where he's had 10 rush attempts. He's averaging 26.8 points per game in those. And he scored, again, there was one game he had 13. Other than that, I think it's like 23 points or more. And all of them, and I know it seems like a lifetime again, but week 1, 7 catches, 70 yards. And that was in a game that, again, Tyreek and Waddle, if I remember correctly, both went over 100 yards. So I just think that's a smash, especially versus Arizona. That's really bad. And then Javonte, man, like I'm having to get over just how many times he's burned me, Joe, because he has burned your boys so many times, whether it be drafting him in season long or playing him in DFS. Like it just prop bets. Like it always seems to be Javonte, but I played him in most of my captain's lineups last week. So maybe we've turned a corner, right? Like where when he's playing bad defenses, he's been good. And it's not a bad defense. It's potentially the worst one I've seen. I mean, maybe in my lifetime. I mean, Carolina is so bad. I still can't get over. Daniels got knocked out immediately. And Marcus Mariota, not knowing he was going to play, and Washington put up 40 on him, which is just yikes. And for Williams, I mean, he's now at 13 carries or more in 3 or 4. He scored double digits in 3 or 4. And what I like about him so much is I think his floor is significant this week because they give up a ton of receptions. Carolina does to running backs. And Williams, I think over his last 5, 29 targets, 22 receptions, 170 yards. Those are just free points. And I do think that we saw last week, they're going to keep feeding him the rock. His second touchdown was when that game was well out of hand. I believe it was actually the last touchdown of the game. So they were up like 26-10 at that time. So those 3 guys, like you could make a case again for some of the expensive guys. You could make a case maybe for some, cheaper ones, but it's hard not to just play those 3 guys. That what would they be? That's 12-2 and 6-3. So what is it? We're talking about 18-5. That's a pretty small percentage of my salary. They all have great matchups. They're all receiving significant volume. I guess A-Chain would be the one that has the potentially the smallest, but he's been seeing a ton of volume without Tua. I just like that's where I'm going. I know you agree with those guys. Or any other that you really, want to push or consider?
I mean, I'll say that I'm ownership be damned. I'm on the Breece Hall play.
Okay, I like that.
Patriots, bottom 5 rushing yards allowed, bottom 5 total yards allowed to running backs, bottom 5 touchdowns allowed, bottom 5 DVOA. So even where you account for game situations, like this is just a bad defense. And I'm kind of across the board, which has surprised me a little bit, which again is why Gerard Mayo is calling out his entire team for not being tough. Whether or not, like you said in the last pod, if you're the head coach, maybe that's your responsibility.
Bold move, Joe. Yeah, it's bold to be like, you guys need to toughen up. It's like, how about you run a tougher practice, bro? Like they're not even
obviously. He's hoping it's a motivational ploy. You call your guys out. We'll see if they respond. I would love to just watch this Jet season get even more hilariously bad. So it would be hilarious to me if it works. As long as they don't stop Breece Hall, because again, he's going to be in a lot of my lineups. Like I said in the last spot, this was the guy who was consensus number 2 running back coming into the season. Now he's the 8th most expensive running back coming off back-to-back mid to high 20-point games against a terrible defense. That doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Obviously, like you said, like 40% of people, maybe by the time the game starts, agree with me.
Maybe it goes the other way, Joe. You know what I mean? Like maybe because so many people see that, that actually goes the other direction. Because
maybe it drops down. Everyone's like, I don't want to.
Because there was a similar situation a few weeks ago, and that's exactly what happened. Was they were around like 25%, and then it ended up being, I think, like 16-17 by, when the actual games come out. And we've talked about this before. I would give anything for somebody to have a podcast or a documentary I could watch on how they come up with projector ownerships and all this stuff, just so that way, because I mean, they usually are relatively close. Like, I'll give them like the really high sites that you have to pay for. They're pretty good at what they do. It's just, to me, it's fascinating. The other thing I like, to your point, is like last week, I think it proved that adding Devontae, even if he can't run, like what happened, you can't cover Devontae, you can't cover Garrett Wilson, you can't cover Allen Lazard, and then, this little running back, like that's where he really took off last year at first, was in the passing game. And I can't remember the last time a running back had 6 for 103. Like, that is really impressive. Seriously. Like,
6 for 103.
Yeah.
That's a rarefied air right there. And then, otherwise, I think, you hit it where we're like in that mid-range area where, it's Kareem Hunt, who's become the volume king recently, again, in a game where I know in the last few years, there's been a couple times when the Raiders have surprised Kansas City.
Last Thanksgiving.
I would probably be more shocked than ever before if that happened. But, weird things happen in division games, but the most likely scenario is Kareem Hunt sees 20-plus carries in a game Kansas City's easily winning. Like you said, A-Shane, we've seen what it looks like when it's good. And, Cardinals, good chance for things to get good again.
They're in the same position the Rams were. Like, and it makes me feel even better. I haven't seen the Rams Thursday. It's like, these elite offenses, if everybody's healthy, it doesn't take like a lot of warm-up or whatever. It's just then all of a sudden there's speed and talent everywhere, and they're just going to cook.
And it's amazing the turn from just like the 2 days prior, just hearing people be like, where are they going to trade Cooper Kupp to? Yeah. And then they beat Minnesota.
Stafford potentially too. Like, that's what
right. And now it's
crazy.
Like they're a game out of first place.
And Seattle's playing Buffalo, who could, again, they could easily lose that game.
Obviously, Dallas is not playing awesome right now, but Dallas still has plenty of talent, and San Francisco is just ravaged with injuries.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, you might be less than a game out. So, the switch that can happen there. And obviously, I expect Buffalo will, again, I think within the division, obviously I'm not saying things larger. They seem like the new Patriots where you just bet on Buffalo to win the division every year.
Mm-hmm.
But no one's really running away with wild card stuff in the NFL or the AFC. Because it's like, the Bengals feel like, they'll get a wild card. Like, the Bengals are, what, really? 500, 3-4?
Yeah.
Like, there's opening. So, Miami wins this game. You're like, all right. They're back.
It looks like, T. Higgins could miss this week, to your point. So, I'm with you.
And then the other thing, too, is we've seen this. The Cardinals defense did a solid job last week against our guy, JK, who hopefully will have his bounce back this week. 2 weeks prior, they played the Niners and the Packers, which, again, all the same coaching tree as McDaniels. 248 yards rushing on 48 attempts. So solid volume, over 5 yards an attempt in those games. And, as we saw last season, 5 yards per attempt can be below average game for HA. So, I'm with you there. I'm probably sticking in that range where I'm putting Hall with one of those guys or maybe two of those guys, and I'm running with that because, there's the opportunity with Rachaad White if Bucky Irving is out.
I like that MME play. I don't think I like
it. But, the problem is, too, you guys have one of the strengths of the defense has been limiting running backs in the passing game. And that's what you're banking on with those guys. So, to me and Cash, I'm probably not going lower than Javonte this week. And, if you wanted to just save the money and not be in with me and, a third plus of people on Breece Hall, you can easily do a Javonte A-Chain combo or Kareem Hunt combo, and I would feel pretty good. I think those are top 15 plays, top 10 plays.
And to your point, I know he gave up the touchdown, so that makes Walker obviously had a good game, but he was coming off 4 receptions, 36, 7 receptions, 57, 8 receptions, and then 2 for 24, not for the touchdown. Like they really did. They maintained him. He just scored twice. I don't know if Rachaad White scores twice. You know what I mean? Even if everything went well in a similar situation, because that just, we'll see. I know they're out of a lot of options.
It's just the price difference there is just not enough for me to feel great about it, because it's $300 him versus Javonte, who you laid out the case. Like, I feel much more confident in that case. If it was, Rachaad White 5,200, now I'm much more interested.
Completely agree. All right, wide receiver. Again, I keep trying to make a case, for Chase. AJ's obviously, I mean, like, you look at what he's doing each week. It's almost like Joe Mixon, who I know we kind of brushed over, but it's like these guys that are just basically every game scoring. Like for Brown, it's been 20 points. For Mixon, it's certainly been 29 points. At some point, you probably should just keep rolling the dice and playing the averages until, you know what I mean, they show you something otherwise, especially when they have decent matchups. But it's, again, for me, it's just, I like guys cheaper more. Like Tyreek, for me, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I know it's a little bit more risky because we got to see what Arizona, can do in return. But $7K for Tyreek with Tua, are you freaking serious? This is like what dreams are made of. Tyreek, I went back and looked. He scored 25 or more points in 10 of his last 18 regular season games with Tua at QB. And double-digit points, by the way, in every one of them. So if you're thinking, well, he probably had like one. Nope. He scored at least 10 points in every single one of them. I can't turn that down. Yes, there's the risk again that maybe they get up. But I look at like the Jacksonville game week 1. They won that 20-17. And in that game, all those guys went off despite them only scoring 20 points, right? Like Tyreek had 40 yards. Waddle had 100 yards. A-Chain had 7 for set. Like, so there's enough there. And I also just, again, Drake London right there at 7,200, just the model of consistency. I mean, if you look at it, since week 1, 17.4, 18.7, 12.4, 36.4, 19.4, 18.3. So pretty much sign them up for like 17, 18 points. And oh, by the way, this is the one team that so far this year, he absolutely cooked. And you can't tell me with Tampa's issues against the pass, which they still are having, that Atlanta's going to watch that game tape where I think they threw like 28 passes to Darnell Mooney and Drake London to huge success. I think you're going to see more of what we saw from the Falcons prior to the last few games where they tried to really establish the run. And it made sense because those teams were struggling with it. And I think that they're just going to cook. So, like, those two guys are automatic for me. I know you feel good on those. Where are you at on DJ? Because that was another guy we had talked about. Like, do you feel good or are you more nervous? Because obviously we were talking about we like Caleb. Would you pair him? Or, like, would you look somewhere else? Like, how do you feel about DJ and Cash?
You could talk me into just rolling with Caleb because I just think there is going to be a point where we're going to have the really big Odunze game because
I just think Allen, like last week, right? 2 touchdowns for Allen, like
right.
Like
again, Odunze was a guy where I think consensus was overall like he's probably just a step behind Harrison and Neighbors, but also ahead of Brian Thomas. And I'll grant you, Harrison has also been a little bit disappointing, but 2 of those guys have been freaking incredible. And so now, granted, it's the LSU guys, and LSU guys apparently are just guaranteed to be insane constantly. It's just like draft LSU receivers. But it's like Odunze is I think, a really good receiver. I think he will have his moment. So if you want to roll the dice, because I think he's 5,200, I think you could. But again, Washington, 86 yards per game to number 1 receivers this year. That's 30th. So the fact that we're talking about a defense that's been awful at stopping number 1s, a defense that in general I don't think is good. Yeah, to me, if I'm going Caleb, again, if you wanted to go, just be like, hey, I'm getting London and I need to go cheaper somewhere else. I'm okay with that because I love the London play. But yeah, in general, I am going to be pairing DJ with Caleb.
Projection right now, because I did want to look like kind of what he was. Mm-hmm. That's the 12th wide receiver. That's not bad. Like if it was a higher number, I might be a little bit more willing to say maybe I need to back off of this. But the issue I'm having really honestly with DJ is just I like Brian Thomas better at 6,400, right? Like he's 200 cheaper. You see what I'm saying? Like, does that make sense? Like, would it make sense to play Caleb naked and, like, for instance, play London, Tyreek, and Thomas? Because you can do that with the tight end position, and then there's a wide receiver that we're going to talk about in a minute that he's going to be in basically every lineup I have this week because he's so cheap, and I just think the volume is going to be outrageous.
Now, I would say I think I like more straight up a tiny bit more than Thomas. So, but with the $200 difference, I'd say that's like a toss up for me. And I will say Caleb has enough rushing ability that I don't
90
even think
yards the last two. 90 yards.
Like if Caleb has a game, right? If he runs for 50 yards and like 2 scores, that's a thing that's totally within the realm of possibility. And then you don't need a wide receiver at all. And maybe it would actually even be a negative because if he's getting the rushing touchdowns, which
right.
If I remember right, when he played my Arizona Wildcats back when we were good last season, he had 2 or 3 rushing touchdowns in that game. Like he had one of his worst games passing, I think, last year against us, and just found
they're designing run plays for him. Like that was the thing that shocked me from the Jaguars game because I watched obviously it in the London game, standalone. But, like they were designing plays for him with Swift, where almost some like read option type stuff.
Now, the one other guy in this price range that the more I've, was digging through the numbers, I was like, oh shit, I should be talking about him is T. Higgins. Now, he apparently injured his quad in practice today. So
be careful. You need to make sure.
So obviously, you want to be double checking that. But the Eagles are 7th in the amount of man coverage they run this year. And thus far this year, T has been cooking, man. He has a 29% target rate. I don't know if that keeps up because it's 8% higher than Chase so far this season. And I don't know that I foresee, as good as I do think T. Higgins is, I don't think he's going to keep an 8% target rate higher than Jamar Chase against any defense. But still, he's getting 29%, which is a huge number, even when you're not playing with Jamar Chase. And he's top 10 so far in fantasy points per route run for wide receivers. So he's been cooking, man. The Eagles play, man. And obviously, the beauty of playing next to Jamar Chase is the safety gets shaded over to the other side. Now, you are playing Fangio, so it could be a lot of too high, so maybe you're not getting some easy stuff. But yeah, if you go Burrow, which I don't think is a crazy pick, but again, I'd rather go Love if I'm in that price range.
Right.
I'd be probably pairing him with T just because it's so much cheaper. So I think right there, Thomas, T, Moore. I'm probably throwing one of those guys in every lineup. I might be going till day of for me to decide which guy I'm hitting the hardest, but I think all 3 are good options.
Yeah, and I just want to point out for the Brian Thomas thing, this is very simple for me. I mean, well, actually, it's still very simple. I mean, I didn't even realize this dude scored 20 points or more in 3 or 4. And what's crazy is like last week was a prime. He had 5 targets and he turned in 89 yards and a touchdown. But what it is obviously I think Green Bay is going to be winning. So that means they're throwing. That's good for him. They run single high 55.3% of their snaps. It's one of the higher rates in the NFL. And Thomas versus single high. Thank you, Fantasy Points Data, for this great information. 23% target share. That's good. The 3.12 yards per route run. That's real good. But for me, it's the 26.3% first read share. Meaning that pretty much when they see single eye, 1 out of every 4 plays, they're like, yeah, we're going to Thomas. So I do really like him at that price. And again, I'm not going to go over as many guys as we normally do because like Mooney, great play this week. Like he's the other guy that like he's been quiet. Yeah. His percentage of guarantee, his ownership's going down. Remember, he scored 34 points versus this team last time. Okay. And Tampa Bay really struggles on the routes that he runs, the vertical routes. But the reason that I'm not giving you a ton of play because I gave you the expensive ones is because of Cedric Tillman. Like, to me, it's a slam dunk. Like, I'm playing him 12 targets, 81 yards. He caught 8 passes. Jameis is a huge obviously upgrade compared to our boy, he who must not be named.
I was going to say, don't even. I know it's just a turn of phrase, but let's not call him our boy in any way, shape, or form.
And what's crazy, and this is why I'm so excited about it, Tillman is right now projected to be the 20th most owned wide receiver, 4.2%. And I assumed that would be much higher. And the reason why is his snap share and routes, okay? He had not eclipsed 37% of snaps or ran routes on more than 11 passing plays but once this season before week 7. Obviously, we know what happened, right? They got rid of Amari Cooper. That number jumped to 80% of snaps, and he ran routes on like 40 plays. And just automatically, look what happens. He sees again, 46 routes, 82% of them. So he actually ran routes on more than he did snaps. And then the 12 targets and 127 air yards, with most of that being Deshaun Watson and DTR. And Jameis, much better. And you just look at Winston. He had that. I know a lot of people are like, well, Elijah Moore, Jerry Jeudy. Okay, fair.
Elijah Moore has been really bad this year, even like removing the Watson stuff, just grading out on like PFF and stuff. So there's always the chance, but I would be steering towards one of the other two guys. And considering the amount of risk that's still inherent here, I think, going with the cheaper play could be the move rather than, if you get nothing from Tillman, you're not really kicking yourself. You get nothing from Jeudy, you're kind of like, that was almost 5K. I don't feel great.
You're getting something. Because again, that last drive, and that's, to me, this is what makes me feel very comfortable. He throws it 11 times. I know that's, they're in just chuck it whatever mode.
Sure.
Tillman saw 3 of them. Njoku saw 3. Jeudy saw 3. So even just in the small sample size that we got of Winston, they continued to go to. Because remember, he got 9 targets already in that game from DTR and from Watson. I just again, for 3,300, that's a smash. If you want to go another pivot, the other guy I'd say is Rashad Bateman at 4,300 and Franklin at 4,100. Like, those are the other two that where you're spending a little bit more. Franklin, you got the situation with Reynolds, which is just so sad, but he scored double-digit points the last 2 games. It's kind of the same deal as what we saw with Tillman, where he went from not playing any snaps, not running any routes, to all of a sudden playing snaps, running routes, back-to-back double-digit games. And with Bateman, he's just been really effective lately, like very effective. And I just they seem to be wanting, because I think it's not a coincidence that he keeps having better and better games. I mean, you look at 4 for 58 touchdown, 4 for 71, 4 for 121 and a touchdown. And I think they know that as great as this offense is, they need him and they need Mark Andrews to, you know what I'm saying, make it a little bit more diverse in that passing game than just Zay Flowers for them to truly be an elite offense. And that's kind of, if you've noticed, where it's been funneling the last couple of weeks, right? Like, Andrews was doing nothing. Bateman had basically done nothing through 3-4 weeks. And then all of a sudden now they're making sure to get them plays. And they're open because, again, they're only targeting them like 3-4 times a game. But the defense obviously is so much attention on Henry, so much attention on Lamar, so much attention on Zay Flowers. And then all of a sudden somebody like Bateman, who has big play capability, he ends up, making these big plays. I mean, he's had a play, I believe, a catch of 30 yards or more in 3 straight. So those are the cheap options that I'm throwing in at wide receiver. But I mean, that's pretty much what it's going to be this week. Like, unless something drastic happens, going to be a lot of Tyreek Hill, a lot of Drake London, and then I'm going to mix in these cheap guys, basically.
Yeah, I like that Bateman play. Again, Browns #1 in man coverage rate. They run man 40% of the time, which is massive in today's NFL. Bateman so far this year, his target rate jumps from 12.5 to 21.7 going from zone to man. So 9% leap. His fantasy points per route run remains almost exactly the same. But if we're talking about a guy who's been productive lately, and fingers crossed it keeps up, always been a Bateman fan.
And Flowers is nicked up, I should say. Like, he didn't practice until today in a limited fashion. You agree, right, that if for some reason Flowers is out, he's an automatic start in cash.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
100%. I mean, across the board, I'm probably tossing.
Right, that's fair. Yeah, that's true.
If there's no one there. The one mid-tier guy I want to talk about is Romeo Doubs, just because.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I will say, I looked back at Jaden Reed's productivity against man last year, and he did fine. So the fact that Reed only has 8 receiving yards against man so far this season on 46 routes is probably fluky, and I still think he's probably the best.
Maybe it's the number one corners he's facing. Like, I was trying to think maybe they've played some like really good corners, right? And so when they're running man, teams are starting to put their best corner on Reed.
That could be it. And I also think what Kevin said, where I think probably even more so than last year, they're like, all right, we have these receivers. They each have their different role, and he very much is in the
Bill Belichick mode, right? Yeah, like we're going to take these guys and use
short routes, carving up zones. So if that continues and he continues to be much more productive against zone than man, the Jags are top 5 in man coverage.
Yep.
And so that means I'm looking for who's going to beat up on man. Watson and Doubs have been the most productive on a fantasy points per routes run perspective. Wicks has had by far the highest target rate. But the key thing here is none of these guys is massively different in price. Doubs is 5,700. Let's see. Wicks is 53. Watson's 52. So they're all pretty close together. The difference is Wicks and Watson are out there about 50% of the time. Doubs is out there 87% of the time. So if he's going to be out there almost every play, well, those other two are split in time. Give me Doubs. And again, I really like Jordan Love this week. The only thing is, would you rather go a little safer with Lamar or cheaper with Caleb? But I think he's good at that 7,000 price range. So if I'm pairing him with someone,
right? Like that's the hard part. Like I really have this year now, like because that's what you look at, like Caleb, Nix, Lamar. Like I want that floor, right? And it seems like the only way you can, and again, Jordan Love is the one guy that's proven
his floor so far this year has been 17 points.
That's what I'm saying. Like he's like, screw you, but also can he keep up the pace where he's throwing 3 passing touchdowns? Probably versus Jacksonville, yes. I'm just worried that the minute I go all in on him, you know what I mean? It's like
right. That's what
have a day that, like Jacobs will have 4 touchdowns. I mean, he won't even be bad. He won't have the touchdowns.
Incredibly aggressive throwing the ball, maybe too aggressive at times, but
really?
Yeah, as long as he's being aggressive and assuming, God forbid knock on wood, the Packers don't suddenly turn into the Niners or the Bucks where everyone's getting hurt. Yeah, I think he's going to keep being super productive. The one super cheap guy that I wish I'd mentioned in our last pod, but of course, you in between pods, I'm like, I'm going to keep doing research. And I'm like, oh, I should have been talking about this guy. Why did I miss him? Devon Vele of the Denver Broncos. 6'5" power slot guy out of Utah. 2 weeks ago to the Chargers, he gives us nearly 12 points. And then facing the Panthers, who, of course, just generally really, really bad. But right now, they're playing in the slot, according to all the depth chart stuff I've seen on ESPN, on PFF, Chow Smith-Wade, who is a 5'11" rookie. Ooh. So again, he is 6'5". Chow Smith-Wade has not played enough snaps to officially get ranked by PFF among corners. Right. But his coverage grade right now is 30.1. Again, that is out of 100. So he has been horrifically bad in the limited snaps that he's played. If we go to our old trusty matchup advantage on PFF, Vele has the 3rd highest score this week behind A.J. Brown and Justin Jefferson. You can get him for 3,400. Now, obviously, the one risk here is Bo Nix is the quarterback. Vele is, again, looking at all the depth chart stuff I've seen, currently supposed to be the starting slot after, we've seen some injuries. Reynolds there in Denver. But you're betting on the 3rd wide receiver on Denver with Bo Nix in a game where they could just take control and we're just seeing a bunch of Javonte Williams in the second half.
Like what happened in the New Orleans game, basically. Because that's but yeah, but he still ran 73% of the passing plays. He's ramping up. Involved. Yep.
And the thing is, too, again, he is ramping up his involvement. Unsurprisingly, he is also a rookie, so that's what happens. Panthers are 11th in zone rate. They don't run a lot of man. So far this year against zone, Bailey has run the 5th most total routes. Again, though, that's moving up on the Broncos. He is 2nd in yards. He is tied for 2nd in receptions. So even though he's 5th in routes run, the only guy who's been more productive has been Courtland Sutton. And on a per route run basis, it's not even close. Bailey's been the best. So a team that runs a lot of zone, starting a rookie corner who's going to be 6 inches shorter than Bailey, I'm going to roll the dice. I'm definitely going to roll the dice in larger fields. And just to find those extra savings, he's going to be in at least 1 or 2 of my cash games.
Man, I love this. So his routes versus zone, 54-14 versus man. His target rate is 28% versus zone to 7%
like more than doubles. Yeah.
And his win rate is 44% versus zone compared to 16%. That is very good stuff, Joseph.
According to PFF's numbers, he's not caught a pass so far against man. So
he's
very much matchup dependent.
It is because his fantasy points per target, it's 0.00 versus man.
Right.
Love that. That is fantastic stuff. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I know this is not an MMA show, but I am definitely now going to have a Bo Nix, is it Bailey? Is that how you say it? Bailey and Franklin stack, because good God. I mean, you're talking about like 12, 13K to get the 2, basically probably everybody but Sutton basically in that passing game and Javonte. So sign me the frick up. All right. The tight ends this week, I really do. I think it's the best week for tight ends I can remember in such a long time, because if you want to spend up, I mean, obviously you get Brock Bowers against the defense that is the worst in the NFL versus tight ends. That's a great matchup, but I can't play him. Like it was what I made the case to Kevin. Again, I am the friggin' CEO and founder of the Brock Bowers fan club. Okay. I'm getting David Njoku for $1,000 cheaper, who saw 14 targets in the first game without Amari Cooper. And really the big deal is you started running routes. I mean, you go back to last year with Flacco, it was the same deal. Like if he's on the field and running routes with 7% of plays, he's getting like 8 to 10 targets at minimum. And that, again, Amari Cooper was with them at that time. And then on top of that, James is just such an upgrade. And then finally, it's just like a dream scenario. Baltimore's offense is so good. Of course they're going to be up, and they're going to be throwing, right? So to me, that's almost an automatic start. I know he's going to be so high owned, but it was the same situation last week. I pounded the table and told everybody to play him. And if you did, it worked out very well. So, I mean, I think you got to go back to that. Well, especially with Winston. Like if this was DTR, maybe I'd have some pause, but with James is going to be slinging it. We know that. And then right underneath
one thing you can count on.
Right? James is going to be James. And I think Evan Ingram is an incredible play. And I meant to let me see if I can see what his ownership is, because people, again, are going to look at that last game because, right, he had the monster game his first game back. I believe he caught all 10 of his targets. So he had, if I remember correctly, yeah, he did. He had 10 targets. He caught 10 passes for 100 yards. So he had that monster game. First, a good defense, by the way, in Chicago. And then last week, 5 for 35, by the way, on 5 targets. So Trevor Lawrence is now connected with him on his last 15 pass attempts.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's not bad. And people are going to look at 8.5 points because it's disappointing. Again, Jacksonville ran it 19 consecutive times in the second half. That's how much they were just like, okay, we have this game. And he still scored 8.5 points. He still got, 5 targets, 5 receptions. I'm sorry, Jacksonville's defense sucks. Green Bay is going to score points, 110%.
Yes.
And I just feel like you're going to end up with, by doing that double stack, and it's probably what I'm going to do in most of my lineups. I feel like you're getting 2 number 1 wide receivers for 10,100, both with very good matchups with teams that struggle versus their position, and both versus very good offenses right now that you would assume would be up, putting them in a very pass-heavy game script, right? So I don't know what I'm missing there. Like even Cade Otton, who I love, and obviously I'm going to let you talk about him because I know that's the guy you really been pounding table, and I love him. I do worry, though, is Tampa going to try to run the ball, right? Like without all those weapons, and Tampa has been, like I know Atlanta's been pretty good against the run, but Tampa, like one of the most shocking things is Tampa is so much better running the ball this year. Like they're averaging, I think, like over 150 yards per game on the ground. Is that what they lean into, right? Like going, look, we got into a shootout with Atlanta last time. Unfortunately, we lost. It'd be one thing if we still had Evans and Godwin. Let's do this again. Are they going to this time say, you know what? We're going to run the ball and try to, shorten this game and see if we can't steal it, because it's a huge game in the matchup. But I just it's hard for me not to get to Njoku and Ingram again because of their cost. But I mean, there's all these good plays though. Like Kraft's a good play this week. Pitts is a good play this week. Like all the good tight ends that should get volume, they're also in a situation where it's the best matchups possible. These are the teams that are like 24 through 32nd.
Right. A lot of great ones.
Right. But I mean, I'm with you that ultimately Cade Otton's probably even safer than Njoku because he's at what, 2K or 1,700 cheaper, 1,600 cheaper.
Right. It's a massive difference. Yeah, I would say, like you said, Bowers, I feel free to fire up. Again, it's the most productive tight end. Well, I can't remember if Kittle overtook him or not, but
who would have ever thought I'd start 3 tight ends this week if I could? If I could somehow make it where I could start, I
wouldn't hate it. Yeah, I wouldn't hate it. But yeah, Brock Bowers, number 1 option in the offense, super productive, worst defense against tight ends. You got to feel good there. I think regardless of price, if you said Njoku's a better play than Kelsey or McBride, I don't know if I'd be like, 100%, but I'd be like, I'm not going to argue with you. So to me, I'm not sure
with
why.
Jameis this week, right? Like to me, it's like so much.
Yeah, if it's Watson, that's a very different story. I mean, it's like last week where, the reason that Njoku has the huge game is because Jameis comes in, finds him,
he scores a touchdown. Zone. Yep. Even though he had a bunch of receptions before then, but he caught the 2 and more importantly, the touchdown.
Right. It's like, oh, what a surprise. Watson leaves for 1 quarter and he catches his first touchdown of the season. So, kind of tells you all you need to know there. Yeah, I like the Ingram play. I definitely like the Njoku play more. So unless you absolutely have to have the $100 for something else, I'm definitely getting Njoku first. And then if you want to pair him with
Ingram is 6% owned, which is, again, because tight end's such a crap show. That's the 6th most owned tight end. Let me see what Njoku's projection is. I wonder if it's
that's interesting.
Oh no, it's actually I love seeing that. 9th, Joe. It's actually less, 4.2%.
Oh my
so
God.
I may pivot off the Ingram play with that to you. Let's see what Otton's at while you're go ahead, keep going.
The Otton pricing, I don't understand. Just straight up. I mean,
it's kind of like Tyreek's, right? Like to me, it's almost the same thing. We kind of knew Tua was coming back. They knew when the pricing came out.
With Tyreek, you can at least
2.5%, Joe. He's the 11th projected most owned tight end. Yeah, I'm going to go to Otton and Njoku. That makes so much more sense because they're less owned. Wow.
No, but the thing with the comparison there is with Tyreek, you can at least point to he's getting 11 points per game this season so far. Obviously, don't expect that to remotely continue with Tua.
Right.
But there is a lack of productivity there for a guy in that price range. Now, listen, obviously, I know why Travis Kelce is so much more expensive than Cade Otton. But he's averaged 0.1 points more per game this season. 0.1 points. He's facing a defense that's been top 10 against tight ends. Cade Otton is facing the 15th defense against tight ends. So a good defense versus an average defense. And really, Otton had 1.1 points because he had a negative game week 2 in the first 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So since then, he's had 3 double-digit games. He hasn't scored less than 7. So you're at least getting double his price point And that was before the top 2 receivers got hurt. Last week, he had 21 points.
A lot of that came after Evans went out. He immediately became like basically the number 2 option. And oh, by the way, now the number 1 option once Evans went out is not there either.
Right. So, yeah, you take away those first 2 weeks, and this is a guy averaging over 11 points per game. And then that's over 5 games. So it's, small sample size, but not super small for what we generally are working with in a football season.
He runs routes all the time too. Like you used to talk about this last year all the time, right? Like he's on the field all the time and he's always running routes.
And then per PFF, 21.3% target rate against zone, 5.6% against man, 1.5 yards per route run against zone. Who runs a ton of zone? The Atlanta Falcons.
Like the highest, 5th or 6th highest in the league, I think.
Yeah. So 3,500 is insane to me because I'm looking through and I'm like, you know what? I think Cole Kmet's a pretty reasonable play against Washington. Why in the world would I ever start Cole Kmet over Cade Otton when I have to spend $1,200 more? Even Tucker Kraft. I think all these guys are good plays. Like you said, there are a lot of tight ends. I'm not going to tell you don't start Kmet, don't start Kraft. If you have that gut feeling, a couple of these guys I think are going to hit. But to me, for the price point and what we know, it's hard to argue against Njoku Kmet, or not Njoku Kmet, Njoku Otton. Yeah. That like 8,600 for those 2 guys.
It's crazy.
That's wild to me. And
then if you want to play Mixon, if you want to play Breece Hall, like you can even spend up and play Lamar, right? Like if you do that, for sure.
There's the floor for a guy in the 3,500 range is usually 0.
Yeah.
Like that's what can happen. And
unless
again, 5 straight weeks,
then I recommend him.
5 straight weeks we've had at least 7 points. So that's at least double. And he could score 5 or 6 times his price range. And I wouldn't be that surprised.
No, he had 4 for 44 again when Evans went off last time. Godwin went off last time. Bucky Irvin went off. And he still had 4 for 44, which we know at tight end a lot of weeks that is.
Yeah, unless you're just like, I want that Njoku Bowers play because I freaking think those are the top 2 tight ends overall this week, and I'm in. And like you said, we can't start 3 tight ends. So if that's what you want to do, fine. I'm not going to fight you there because I think, again, those probably are my top 2 tight ends overall. But otherwise, this is the best play to save money. And so whether you're just going with him or you're doubling him up with one of those guys, I'm putting Cade Otton just across the board.
I love that. And I mean, again, I would actually argue, I would rather play Ingram than Bowers. Ingram has proved
that's fair.
Because he's got a better QB and he actually has some guys around him. His ceiling games.
You can't just focus on him. You can't key on him.
And it's like, I mean, that's the intrigue to me about Ingram, but Ingram is so risky, right? Because he'll have games where he has like 7, 8 points, but he also pretty frequently, since he's been in Jacksonville, will have like these 20, 30 point games. Right. That's what comes with being like the 3rd most targeted player in the NFL last year. Just to again show you the craziness of Otton's pricing. Travis Kelce, since Rashee Rice went out, right? 3 games, 24 targets in those games. Cade Otton's last 3 games, 20 targets. So he's basically seeing the same
it's not that far off, yeah.
Travis Kelce seeing without Rashee Rice. It's nuts. And I love it. All right, defense real quick, then we'll get out of here. I love how we're going to do a short episode and we're an hour, 3 minutes in. You got to love us. You just got to let us, you got to let you got to let a peacock. So,
as they say.
Yeah, I don't think anybody says that, but I'm an idiot, so no surprise there. We talked about this on the show earlier. It's hard for me to not just spot start Chicago if it looks like Daniels is out, right? Like, I mean,
sure.
We had this argument on the last show. I just like, yeah, you can make a case for Denver, especially saving all this money. Maybe you know what I'm saying, with all the money you saved, if you just have all this left over, screw it, right? Like, you're just going to put them in. Sure. I do really like them versus Carolina with Bryce. I think it's going to get out, especially being in Denver. Like, if it was in Carolina, I would feel more better about it. But, like, Denver's last 2 home games, they destroyed.
This is a good defense.
Yeah, they're a good defense. And again, like I don't even know who do you put Patrick Surtain on in that situation when Deontay Johnson out. Like who are you shadowing?
Right? I really don't know. Because that's the thing. It's like if Deontay's out there, you're like maybe Bryce he's had time to sit. He'll be less jittery, more prepared. Deontay's good. Yeah, no Deontay on the road against the best cornerback. Although like he can erase whoever you want. Just pick a guy. If someone catches like 2 passes on the first drive, you're just like, all right, Surtain covers that guy now.
Because and again, I'm not trying to talk everybody into playing a 3,700 defense because it's crazy.
No, I don't think I would point
out. Week 1 versus Seattle, 10 points. Week 3 versus Tampa, 15 points. Week 4 versus the Jets, 11 points. Week 5 versus Vegas, 16 points. Week 7 versus New Orleans, 20 points. So it's not that crazy. And the reason why, they, since week 2, was that 12, 15, 8, 24 sacks and an outrageous, what was that? 5, 7, 8 turnovers. Plus they scored a touchdown twice. So, I mean, they're just unbelievable. But again, well, I don't want to revisit this. I just did. Is there any other, because like I know that Kev mentioned Seattle. Does that do anything for you versus Buffalo in Seattle?
I mean, I think again, because we've always been about try and spend down on defense.
Right, yeah.
So, if there's some situation where the rest of your lineup works out perfectly because you save $200 and go down to Seattle, I don't think that's a terrible play. McDonald's, we have a good head coach who, at least so far, it's early in his head coaching career, but a good head coach as far as game planning for defense. We saw that with his work on the Ravens. You've got the Seattle home field advantage. Granted, the Giants beat them in Seattle, so who knows? Anything can happen. But if you're going to roll the dice on someone cheaper, I think the only 2 plays are Seattle and just saying, hey, maybe Tampa Bay is so ravaged that Atlanta can be a decent play. But like you said, you guys don't get any pass pressure. That's kind of the big thing. That's the bread and butter of the fantasy defense. So, if I have to, I guess Seattle's the play. But,
I actually like the other side of that much more if you want to go to that game. Being outdoors at Tampa. Tampa actually gets sacks, right? Like,
all right.
Because they have what? They have 21, or what is that? I'm sorry, I can't do math. 17 sacks over the last 4. The Falcons, I don't even want to know if I want to know this number. We have 3 over our last 4.
Yeah, again, that's not great.
6 on the entire season. Oh, my God. And we had 2 week 1. So we've had 4 since week 1. Oh, I hate it here. Jalen Carter.
It's a disturbing stat.
Jalen Carter would have helped that a little bit there, Joe. Maybe just a little.
Yeah, I think he would have done something there. I mean, I will say though that the Tampa Bay defense, you're without Jamal Dean now. Coverage has not been great there.
We're without Simmons though. Remember too, like he's been ruled out.
But like that is why like we're so big on the wide receivers for Atlanta. So
yep. Mm-hmm.
But I guess you could talk me into one of those 3 plays. Tampa, Atlanta, whoever you like the most, or if you want to go Seattle. If Jaden Daniels plays, because then I'm like, I still might like the Bears the most because I think this is a really good defense. Mm-hmm. And you'd be talking about Jaden Daniels with a bum rib. But if it's Mariota against the top tier defense, I don't. This is, to me, you remove the price tags. And I'm ranking the defenses across the board this week, including like the Monday night game, Sunday night game. Right. The Bears would be in my top 10, and they cost $2,700. And that's what I always look for.
And that's probably going to be Marcus Mariota.
Who's the under $3,000 defense that I would put in my top 10? Because a lot of weeks there's one, and the Bears would be the one. So, I wouldn't overthink it unless you absolutely have to get that $100 or $200. I'm going with the Bears.
I love it. All right, real quickly, we're going to try a new segment to end the show. Let's see your honest reactions to my stacks for my article. Single stat, Caleb DJ. You okay with that?
Sure. Like I said earlier, yeah. I love the Caleb play. DJ against a defense that doesn't stop number one wide receivers. I'm in.
The double stack this week, Bo Nix, Javonte Williams. I'm going to tell you, I would change this if I had known the Valet information. Yeah, but I have Franklin in there. You okay with that one?
I mean, the thing with Franklin, obviously, like I probably like the floor for Valet more this week, but Franklin, because he's such a deep ball guy, that's always an option. And if he was on any other team, I'd probably be lower on him, but he's playing with the guy he played with in college. So yeah, I think even now I would say that's not a bad idea.
And that was one of the things that I mentioned in the article is this Carolina team, they give up a lot of big passing plays. So it's more likely he, maybe hits that big play that he hasn't technically hit, like the 30, 40-yard touchdown. Now here's the game stack. Let me know what you think. Lamar, Bateman.
Obviously good, yeah.
Tillman, Njoku. That leaves me 58.6% of your salary for the rest of your lineup.
I mean, it's good because, yeah, you've spent up on Lamar, which has so far been the safest bet possible. And then the Njoku play, we're all in. Like I said, I like the Bateman one. The Tillman one is kind of a wild card, obviously. But considering how many points the Ravens have given up to wide receivers this year,
I feel so much like it's like Janu Smith last week, that it's just like if you look how much he was targeted in the first game, again, there was a reason too for it, right? Like Amari Cooper was out and they immediately like, okay, we're going to put you on the field a lot, kid. And they just went to him. And it didn't matter. What was crazy, like, is seeing that all three QBs went to him, which I guess shows he obviously was getting open, which is a good sign. But Joe, I appreciate it. I know you did double duty tonight.
I did double duty, but it's still 9:30 here.
Where's my wife? Because she would have really got a kick out of me saying double duty for sure, because she is a 12-year-old boy in so many ways. By the way, this is why I really do love this woman. She texts my dad and Wes, who both defended the Braves. Braves are having flashbacks to when they got rid of Freddie right now. Amazing, all exclamation points. She's a badass. I fucking love her. I really do. I've turned her into a shit talker, which is just my favorite part about it. Like she's a Flemming, man. She's like,
do you guys, are you ever on the opposite side of any of the shit talk? Like I'm talking about sports related, obviously.
Anything I'm competing in, Joe, she basically is rooting against me just to needle me. Yeah. And I respect it. Like the family I come from, like that's respect. Like, does it piss me off in the moment? Because I'm a uber competitive person? You're damn right it does. And you do not want to be playing like board games and stuff with us. Like there's going to be shit flying. We play a game called Palace, which is an amazing card game. If you've never played it, Google it. I think it's the greatest like card game for 2, 3, 4 people to play in the world. Yeah, it's amazing. I'll teach you sometime, Joe. And she gets so mad because it's sort of both a luck. It's a little bit like DFS, right? Like there is some strategy to it, but overall you're pulling cards and you're kind of at the mercy. And when things are going bad, there's just nothing you can do, which reminds me so much like DFS and poker. Like sometimes it's just not your day, but that doesn't mean you're not extremely angry because you're like, I should be able to. It's like, no, you really can't do anything. So, but I hope everybody kills it week 8. I actually really like this slate. Kevin made a great point, 13 games. So that means
it's always nice. Yeah.
Whew, man, a lot of selections. And that's probably why like the ownership, I was shocked to see Cade Otton's the 13th most owned tight end. Like I thought that was going to be a slam. And again, we'll see. It's not the final. But to be like below Ingram, below Njoku, like I'm assuming that just means everybody's loading up on Bowers. Like I really do. I think that's what it is.
That's probably true.
But I still, again, president, CEO, and founder of the Bowers Club. I think that's crazy at 6,100 with Gardner Minshew, by the way, at QB versus I think what arguably is like the best defense in the league, the Chiefs. But all right, for Joe and Keith, this has been fun. If you guys have made it to an hour and 14 minutes, you're the real heroes of this show, and we'll see you guys soon.